want to thank you for joining us once again with A Better Conversation, a podcast that is being produced by A Better Dallas. Today, we're going to continue in our series on the 2024 election. We have with us candidate for Texas House of Representatives in District 113, Mr. Stephen Stanley. He's going to talk to us a little bit about what it is to be a candidate, what life is like as a candidate, and sort of what life is like after the election. So just to go and get started, Stephen, would you mind telling our viewers a little bit about your background and how you kind of came into political involvement?
Well, I never thought about being in politics, but it's one of those things that you always hear that, something will happen in your life or in your city, around where you live that, you go to find an answer and you can't get a straight answer. And, instead of just getting mad, do something about it. So back in actually 1997, I ran for city council in Saxe. I was living out there for a couple of years by then. And, it wasn't a good outcome. I ran against an incumbent. It was like a 65-35 race then that I lost. But I still wasn't getting the answers that I thought were appropriate, or and some of the things I just didn't think that the city was going in the right direction. So the next year there was two other people that ran against incumbents as well as myself. And we replaced one mayor and two incumbents that year. And a lot of it just had to do with, taxes were kept going up and up, and the people weren't feeling like they were getting, services, for the additional taxes. So I got on, was privileged to serve for 6 years out there. That was through 2004. I've been a lifelong realtor, so after my 6 years, I just went back into full-fledged just doing real estate business. I had an office. I managed a couple of strip centers out there. As things go in everybody's life, things happen. I got a divorce. I moved back to Garland, my hometown, and about a year later, met my wife today, Daphne, who is one of our school board trustees for the last 4.5 years, that when we first met, she was one of those that really was not political. And most people, in the grand scheme of things, are not political wonks of any sort. They'll go vote, in their local elections, or maybe the big, general election like we just went through. But on the most part, they'll just do their civic duty and go back home. And so I had that conversation, having served on council, and a couple times, watching my news, no, she didn't appreciate the news all that much. So I asked her, like on our second date, I said, what do you think about politics? And at that point, she said, didn't like it, didn't want to undo it, didn't want to be around it. So I was kind of quiet for, that first year or so. She did find out how much political I was before we got married, so it wasn't a surprise after we got married. But it was about a year later we got married. We just celebrated our 12th anniversary back in end of August.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Especially, asking politics on the second date, being married this long.
Yeah. Well, and it was one of those things, I've seen, people that are on the left marry somebody that's on the right and somehow make it work. I actually got a friend right now that he's very to the left, and his girlfriend that he just got engaged to is very much on the right. I think you actually met him at Intrinsic one day. That it can work, but you've got to. Not everybody is political. We've already started seeing what's going on after this election here in November. Our general election, with what happened in the presidential election and what it's doing to some people that was on the losing side, that in some realm, they've lost their mind. They're people are actually going through filing for divorce because of that election. And I that's one of those things I can't wrap my head around. It's one of those things, I've got people that I've known for years working, after I moved to Garland. I was on the Garland City Council. I worked with a lot of people that were on the left, and most everybody, knew pretty well how, I wasn't just a Republican. I was pretty conservative Republican. but we always knew what we could work with each other on and what to stay away from. So, I was able to build some allies and some kinship with people even on the other side of the aisle. And that was one of the reasons when this opportunity came up this year, I knew that school choice was going to be front and center. We saw what happened in the primaries, and it was all the way through the election cycle that school choice was going to be an issue. ESAs was going to be an issue.
And ESAs, you mean education savings?
Saving, education savings accounts. That those were going to be a major issue, and the current incumbent office holder, she had voted no every time that it came up. And to me, if you're going to be representing an area, and it does lean more to the left, but even people on the left this election cycle knew what happened in our education system starting, in COVID, when parents started finding out really what was going on in their kids' school. They didn't like it, and it didn't matter what your politics was.
Well, let me try to give us a little bit of a roadmap for what you just kind of talked through, because you're a wealth of information, obviously.
20 years.
And so I just want to make sure that it's digestible for anybody that's watching that's not as familiar with politics. So you start off on the Sac City Council. You're on there, I think you said, for 6 years. Is that right?
98 to 04.
Then, so when you left the SAC, a lot of cities have the term limits for city council.
They did.
Do they have those in SAC? Okay. So we don't want to talk about why you weren't on the Sac City Council.
Well, just, I did, we got a lot of accomplished. We doubled in size in that 6 years, went from 8,000 to 16,000. It was always going to be a city, our land planners figured it, approximately 28,000. So, we got most of the large tracts zoned during that time. And so, when it came time for re-election, I put my name in a hat, but, it didn't bother me one way or the other if I got reelected. I was concentrating more on business at that point. And I did lose that race, but I didn't put a lot of effort in it just because I had done what I needed to do. And we moved on back into the real estate business. And like I said, went through divorce, moved back to Garland, met somebody, married a year later, bought a house, and some of the similar things happened there in my immediate neighborhood. Two houses down from me, there was a major Atmos gas transmission line that we had some issues with that. I go to the city and I started getting double speak, and I'm like, y'all know who I am. I've been an elected official, so I know this and I know this. They were trying to, I'm not going to say cover anything up, but kind of blur the picture, so to speak. And I didn't agree with that, and I couldn't get an exact straight answer. So that year I ran and got elected on the Garland City Council.
And so 6 years in Sac. How long were you on the Garland City Council?
4 years.
For 4 years. And then my understanding is that after that you ran for the Dallas County Court of Commissioners?
Yes, for our longtime commissioner, Mike Cantrell, was going to be retiring. And so I ran in the primary. There was three of us, and I was the first one out in that. And the reason, obviously, that I haven't been in public office before, and being in the real estate business, I thought it would go hand in hand in the commissioner's court. And then we had an attorney and a former judge were the other two candidates, and they were more successful in that race.
Well, the reason I'm talking about these different things that you've been elected to or run for is I think it's helpful for our audience to understand what your background is, what different offices you've run for and held, as far as the base of your knowledge. So we've got city council, run for county court of commissioners. You ran for justice of the peace in 2022. Is that?
Yes.
And then this cycle you ran for the Texas House of Representatives in 113.
Correct.
So those different, I guess, levels of office, those different areas of focus, you talked about the things that got you interested in running for the city council in both Sac and Garland. What And obviously the county court of commissioners is something that's very similar on the county level. So what was it that motivated you to take the step from running for the Garland City Council to take that step up for the Dallas County Court of Commissioners?
Yes, it was a larger area, but the way I look at the commissioners court, it's basically a city council for the county, because the county judge is basically the mayor, and then the four commissioners are your city council, and they make very similar decisions, but on a countywide level. So with Commissioner Cantrell retiring, I thought it was a perfect opportunity, to bring somebody in that had some basic knowledge of operations of an organization of that nature.
And what about for a justice of the peace type of position? Actually, if you wouldn't mind sort of explaining a little bit to people about what a justice of the peace is, because it's something that's somewhat unique to Texas in some regards. And then, what are the things that motivated you to run for that office?
Well, Justice of the Peace is a Texas constitutional position. It's the only judicial position in the state of Texas that you do not have to be a licensed practicing attorney or have a law degree to get elected and serve. They figured when the fathers of the Texas Constitution that they wanted somebody that was close to the people. And that could have been, your pharmacist, that could have been the banker, that could have been, a business person in the community, somebody that had, I'm going to say, just reasonable common sense, because probably 75-80% of what most justices of the peace, because and this is the same in all 254 counties. There's 4 districts, and Dallas, because of the population, there's 2 JPs in each one. Oh, excuse me, 5. And there's 2 JPs in each one of the districts, and most of what they do are evictions. They do a lot of weddings. They'll do some small claims court, but there's very little. And I know that there's one attorney here in the Dallas area that has really been pushing the issue to revamp the JP system, just because most of our, up until now, most of the JPs have been just local business people that ran for the position, not licensed attorney. But with me being licensed for 41 years in the real estate industry, I take real estate law. I'm currently doing my MC right now. Luckily, it's only 8 hours of law, but it deals with tenancy and contracts and stuff. So it was something that I've dealt with for 40 years, along with my experience, 10 years of elected office at the council. It just seemed like a natural fit as well, and that's the reason why I thought that would be a good opportunity to also represent the people, because everything that I do and everything that I've done, because of being in the real estate industry for 41 years, it's a people business. I've served on Chamber of Commerce board of directors, youth centers, PTAs, a lot of community organizations as well, and they're all people related. So to me, it was just a different way to serve.
Well, I think that's important for voters and for people in general to be able to understand, is that there are a bunch of different ways that you can be of service, and you don't necessarily have to be some mega wealthy, multimillionaire, billionaire, type of person. Great if you can run for president and self-fund, but not everybody has to do that. And there's a whole variety of reasons that you can get involved. So most recently you ran for the Texas House of Representatives for House District 113. Would you mind explaining, I guess to a degree, what the different scope is between running for the Texas House or when you were running for example, the City Council in Garland?
Ironically, there's a lot of differences between a state office versus a city council or even a school board, because it's the state created the cities and the school boards. They set all the laws, rules, and regulations for the cities and the school boards. So it's one adhering to all of the rules that are handed down from sort of up above, from the higher level up, versus being at that level. And that was one of the reasons why I thought it would be a good fit, having served locally for 10 years, knowing what actually happens regarding the laws that often puts down onto the cities, how that actually works on the ground, that would be a different insight at the state level, whether it's House or Senate, that you have a different perspective that, because one of the things that a number of people I know in local government, municipal government, when they found out that I was running for state house, they go, if you get in, we'll be the first ones on your doorstep to try to repeal what was defined as the Death Star bill from the last session, because the legislature, and this is happens at the local, state, or federal level, something will be going on and they'll create a law to moderate it, kill it, whatever, to address whatever the situation is. And too many times, instead of going in with a scalpel and surgically removing an issue, they'll come in there with a sledgehammer and just blow everything up. And that's what they did with the Death Star bill, is in a lot of respects. And they were having issues in zoning in Austin, the way that they were handling zoning issues, and instead of trying to craft a bill to where it just strictly addresses the Austin area, they did it statewide, and it took a lot of zoning issues out of the hands of the local people, the people that know best on the ground. Austin's very good about telling Washington D.C., you worry about D.C., we'll worry about Texas. We know Texas, but then they did this Death Star bill and turned around and did the same thing that Washington does to them.
Yeah, well, that's a good explanation as far as like the differences in the positions and the roles. What about something like, how many for 113, how many voters did you have like that lived in your area? Not necessarily that cast votes, but how many people live in a House district?
Well, it moderates, obviously, every cycle just with the growth of the state, but they try to make sure that all of them are equal. There's 150 House members, and with 30 million people roughly in the state of Texas, they try to have about 200,000 in each one of the House districts. In this House district, there's, I think it was like 207,000 residents, but only like 128,000 registered voters.
Okay.
So they don't go by registered voters, they go by population.
So how would that compare to the size of the race when you're running for city council in Garland?
Well, city council in Garland, because there's 8 council districts, and Garland's a little over 260,000 population. We had the last adjustment, they moved it to about 29,000 per district. So yes, you represent your one district, but every decision, a lot of decisions that you make at the council level affects the city overall. But you're the one that if the water's not running in your district, you're the one that's going to get that call.
Well, I guess my focus is more on running for those races, right? Running elections. If you're talking about 29,000 voters or 29,000 residents,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, as opposed to 207,000 residents.
Yeah.
So when you're preparing to do something like that, when you're putting your plan together as a candidate, how different is that? What sort of activities are you doing that you might do in one race but not the other?
Well, the local races, it's much easier.
And by local races, you're talking about like city council
races, because you only have roughly 29,000 population that you got to hit. But based on historical records, who's going to come out and vote. So you can narrow that 29,000 down to about 3,000 to 4,000 people. Not every one of those are going to come out and vote in the local race. The last race in my old council seat in Garland, I think there was like 1,800 people that voted. So 18, and there was 2 people in the race. So 1,800 people decided, who's going to represent the 30,000.
Oh, wow.
Like in my wife's race, she's a school board trustee. which covers all of Garland, all of Rowlett, all of Saxe, so some 350,000 population. It's a much different, I guess you could say, apple to try to cut into. Where do you got to go? When she first ran, it was an open seat. And we had been dealing with some stuff with our granddaughter in the Garland School District, and it's like nothing's changed in the public school system in 45 years since my wife and I were in school. When her youngest son was in school, when our granddaughter's in school, no matter if you were in California, Idaho, or here in Texas, it's like she just looked around at me one day. We were in the COVID shutdown stuff, so we were both had our office chairs and stuff set up in the same room, and she just turned. She goes, "I want to run for school board." I'm like, "If that's what you want to do, we'll load up and do it." And so it's a whole different animal going from city council race to a school board race. But luckily, I had been known in two of the cities, having served on their city councils, so was able to use some of the name recognition from that to help her get, because there was three people in her first race, and she only won by 86 votes.
Oh, wow.
Because in school, any school board race in the state of Texas, it's plurality. You just got to win by one vote.
And just quickly, so our audience can understand, you have some races that are plurality and some races that are majority. So some elections, you have to have 50% plus one.
Correct.
You don't get to that threshold, you have a runoff.
Yeah.
And then a runoff is the top two candidates will go and they'll do it again. Plurality is you have your candidates, whoever gets the most votes, whether they get to 50% or not, that's your winner.
Yes, just like what happened in the governor's race with Governor Perry, when we had three people running for governor. He won one year by 38% of the vote. It hurt in our state convention that year because all of your delegates for our state conventions based off of your governor's vote. But city council, your state races, your House members, your senators, your state board of education, your land commissioner, everybody else is 50% plus one. The only one that I know of that is a plurality is school boards, and that's in all 254 counties.
With, like I said, you just ran for 113. Mm-hmm. How different was that from when you were running for the city council?
It's greatly different because no matter what you may hear, every city has got its own footprint. And what I mean by that is whether it's the feel, the composition of the community. For the longest time, I was raised most of my life within about a 20-mile radius of where I live right now. So I grew up in Garland. And for the longest time, Garland was a conservative town. Well, today it's on most days it's still about a 50-50. Sometimes it leans a little bit more to the left than the right. But like our school district, 52% of the students in school today are Hispanic. So, that was a great transition over for Garland. Mesquite, on the other hand, they're a majority of their population. They're more African American in Mesquite, so it's a whole different demographic there. So that's the biggest difference that I had to I guess you could say work through. Garland, always known more conservative, versus a state race that it's in two different cities, and there's. People are looking for different things in a state race than a school race. One thing that I've learned in 25 years of doing this, whether it's city council, my wife's school board, running for a state office, people don't pay that much attention to city council races. They don't watch city council races. If something happens in their immediate neighborhood, they'll show up at a council meeting, and get their 3 minutes. But on the most part, nobody really pays attention to things going on in council. Same thing with the commissioner's court. State house, if it's a key issue, whether it's border security, the school choice, you'll get a lot of people that drive to Austin, to be there, whether to testify or just to be seen as a large faction for or against something. School board races, they actually watch. I've been amazed at how many people today, not when she first got elected in 2020, But today they watch. They go, I saw your wife. Yeah, I saw this at this part of the board meeting. I'm like, they haven't been broadcasting school board races all that long. City councils have been on
Right.
their public access channels for years, or on the internet, and very few people watch.
Well, why do you think that is? That all the interest about the school boards now?
I think a lot of it has to do with what one thing I learned early in life. My dad always said, bad things are going to happen. Always look for the good, even in bad. The one good thing that we found out during the COVID shutdown is some of the things that were going on in our public school system. Because too many times people go, well, we need more money to do this. No, it's not always about the money. It's about what's going on in the schools with the money that they have. Could they use more money today? Yes. I'm never naive enough to think that, trying to cut back, on something, or not giving them a raise, you're still going to get the same outcome. It's what's being taught in the classroom, how it's being taught in the classrooms. There's been so many stipulations and guidelines put into place in your public education system to where you got to have another level of bureaucracy in place to take account for all of the metrics that you got to report back to the state. And once they get all of those stats, what do you do with them? You can say, okay, well, 18% of our kids did this and 37% did that, but if you don't have a to do out of that, what good is taking all of these stats?
Right.
It usually just ends up being, we need more money.
Yeah, and that's it. It adds, because they're and working and through this election cycle, I was, because of one of my donors, I was actually able to work with a conservative think tank there in Austin, and they they actually showed in my last meetings last week with them how many consultants, engineers, architects, and other construction companies are all tied under two or three different people. You'll have dozens across. They're creating a Venn diagram right now showing how so many of these different entities are tied together. So it was a great learning process for me this election cycle. A lot of people have called since the election asking what I'm going to do, and I'm like, let me get my signs picked up and get my rest here for a few days. We'll talk to people after the first of the year, look about what may be in the future.
Well, so I'd like to talk with you a little bit about the 2024 election and some of the specifics that you've experienced running for the Texas House. It's not a lot that people get an opportunity to really see behind the curtain on what a campaign looks like, to really understand what a candidate goes through, all the different things that somebody has to do to make sure their campaign functions and runs well. So sort of just to start off with, what was it that inspired you to throw your hat in the ring for House District 113 this last cycle?
Well, having run for JP, that covered a lot of Mesquite as well. I always had, the name recognition, having served on the Garland City Council, and then with what Daphne does on the school board, I had, name recognition already in the Garland area and to some degree in Mesquite. So, that was one component to look at. The other, did I think I was going to be able to raise funds? I really thought ahead that we would be able to raise much more funds than what we were able to. And I'm appreciative of everybody that contributed, whether it was, even a week after the election, I got a $10 donation. So I appreciate, whether it's $10 or $10,000, everything was greatly appreciated. And I even said it in our executive committee meeting the other night for our Dallas County GOP, that working with the Dallas GOP for the last 25 years, I saw more people step up, our precinct chairs and other volunteers, more people step up this election cycle than I've had in 25 years. And that's people, helping write letters, door knocking, putting out signs, phone calling, phone banking for all of the candidates, none of us could have got as far as we did this cycle without these people. But
Your race was close, right? I mean, you had, what was it,
well,
somewhere around seven, less than 8,000
yes,
votes,
yes,
right? Was the difference in your
out of
race?
61,000, I think it was.
Right. So you had a competitive race. You had a race that you can see the finish line on. I want to go back and talk about a couple of things that you brought up. So one, you talked about name recognition. Would you mind explaining a little bit about what you mean by that and why that's important in a campaign?
I'm going to give a great example to me, or what I didn't know who J.D. Vance was from the Man in the Moon when President Trump picked him to be his vice presidential running mate. When it got down to, and he was having to be introduced to the nation. And when they did the vice presidential debate, I think a lot of and it was one of the most watched vice presidential debates ever in history. But a lot of people, I think, came out of that seeing that not he gives a different, there was a lot of never Trumpers, but a lot of people, I think, saw him as somebody that a little bit more moderate of a view than President Trump is or will be, but it also has a potential not just 4 years, but a 12-year, with a possible 2-term thing for J.D. Vance. But it gave that credibility. In one of these races, if you don't have name recognition, and I'm going to bring up Jason Metcalf that ran for Dallas County Commissioner this cycle. Great guy, great with the numbers, worked his tail off, got a lot of, volunteers, in his district. Him and Amy Ramsey that was running for 114, they had a lot of overlap, so that, they did a lot of stuff together. I was kind of in an island by myself with not a whole lot of other overlap with any other candidates. Jason and I did have a few areas that did overlap just because of Dallas County Commissioner covers 565,000 people or so, so they're gonna overlap a lot in Garland, but not in Mesquite. But it's hard to get your name out there. It takes a lot of money. We were able to do it with some text messaging, right, letter writing. I did the meet the candidate kind of thing in all 3 cities, because I had some in Rowlett, half of Garland, half of Mesquite, and it's just the hardest thing to get the community. I mean, we did banner ads and all that, social media and all that kind of stuff, but it's just hard to get your name out there if the people don't know you. It doesn't matter if you're Republican, Democrat, or anything, they won't vote for you.
Right. So that's the key. If somebody goes to the ballot and they're looking down the ballot, you're gonna have some people that vote pure on party.
Yes.
But you're gonna have a lot of people that don't, and they're more likely to vote for somebody if they recognize that person's name.
And sadly, this has been a thing that the Republican Party have been trying to figure out for decades. We had one of our Dallas County judges, Katharina Haynes, back in the late 90s, early 2000s. She would come to our Greater Garland Republican meetings and such. And this was the first time I ever heard anybody, when somebody asked that question, how do you get people to vote down ballot? Or why do Republicans not always vote down ballot? And she actually got up and stated, she goes, unless people know who you are, that they've seen you, smelled you, touched you, tasted you, they're not going to, Republicans won't vote for somebody just because they're an R. The other side has no problem with that. That was one of the big reasons why the Republican Party of Texas fought to get rid of straight ticket ballot.
Well, and that's a good thing, right? I mean, I think in a healthy democracy, you want people not only voting for the candidate's party, but you want them to vote for that actual candidate and that candidate's
what they stand for. Yes.
And when you're talking about name recognition, it's the difference between, you use President Trump in 2016, for example. When he came down the elevator saying he was, everybody knew who Donald Trump was, right? I mean, he had name recognition more than pretty much everybody else up there on that stage. So you could have a candidate like Rand Paul. So for people that are into politics, you know who Rand Paul is.
Absolutely.
But if you're just, my mom probably didn't know who Rand Paul was. And mind you, I'm going to throw my mom under the bus a lot on the podcast because she is my mom. And because I do think a lot of times, at least for me, when I think of an average voter, I think of my mom. You know, she does her best to try to educate herself, but at the same time, she doesn't live politics every day like
Exactly.
the people on this couch do. So you talked about name recognition, the importance of doing that, how expensive that is. You also talked a little bit about being able to raise money for a campaign. So would you mind, you know, usually when we think about raising money, we think about, you know, the incessant text messages or emails that we get from candidates begging for money.
Yeah.
Would you mind talking through the various ways that as a candidate you'll raise money for a race?
And there's a multitude of ways. You know, it, like you said, you know, it's the text messages, it's the emails, it's the small meet and greets. That, you know, you met somebody over here at a Republican event, and they say, "Hey, I'll host an event at a meet and greet at my house," or you know. Like I just said, you know, at a Republican club, there's typically more women's clubs than just a general audience clubs. I'd love to have like what Rockwall has, their men's club. You'll have 100 people show up to their monthly meetings out there. But when you get into Dallas County, if you can get 15 or 20 people at one of our Republican clubs, you know, and this year, you know, our Republican Women Club, First Ladies there in Garland, Mesquite Women's Club and out in Mesquite, they did a tremendous amount of work for all of our candidates this year, you know, stuffing envelopes and you know, getting signs and just, you know, financial contributions, etc.
And I will make a quick plug for the Mesquite Republican Women, of which I am a member, associate member as a man. Don't forget their Christmas parties on December the 5th.
Yes, there's a lot of things on the 5th.
A lot of things on the 5th, but Mesquite Republican Women Christmas party on December the 5th. You're welcome, ladies.
Yes.
So we have a gigantic following on this podcast already, so I'm sure they'll sell out in no time. But you know, so you talked about a meet and greet. So I've been a precinct chair. Kyle's a precinct chair. You're a precinct chair. When I'm a precinct chair and I'm having a small meet and greet for a candidate and inviting people in my neighborhood to come and attend, you know, part of that is to raise a little bit of money.
Yes.
And I don't want to make you seem entitled or anything like that, but I think maybe it'll help understand what is the range of how much you would expect to raise at an event like that. And I know obviously sometimes it depends upon what the address of the home is.
Yeah.
But like, what is it? If just, you know, just a regular precinct chair like me is having something like, what is it that you're expecting to come out of that event?
You know, a lot of times in those, you know, because you'll have as few as 5 and as many as 25, 30 at these events. You know, you can expect to get, you know, maybe $100 on the smaller side and $500 or $600 on the larger side. Because a lot of times it's the first time that these people are introduced to you. So, you know, they hear, but they Republicans are, you know, they want to do their due diligence. So they'll go look up the website, you know, because I had people, you know, get back to me, well, I didn't see this on your website, or I didn't see that on your website. So they would reach out, and I would actually call and have that conversation with them. But, you know, you're not gonna make bank on you know, the small meet and greets, but it helps create momentum, because if you can get 15, 20 people in a room and even half of them really like you, they may host one for you. And it grows, you know, literally that's how a lot of people get started, is literally through that grassroots.
Well, so, and the reason I ask is because I do want to basically set reasonable expectations for people that may want to do that. I mean, I have talked to precinct chairs that are intimidated about trying to set up a meet or greet because they don't got rich friends.
Yeah.
They don't want to waste a candidate's time if they can't bring in $5,000 or $10,000. So I think it's helpful to understand that, like, look, if you have a small meet and greet and you raise $500, right, out of something like that, that's a win.
Yeah.
Right. That's worth your time. That's a good solid event for somebody to be at.
Absolutely.
So, you know, you talked about the meet and greets, a little bit about the texting and email. You know, I guess the other one that everybody kind of knows about, or we've got these big, you know, quote unquote mega donors, that sort of world. what is it like as a candidate trying to fundraise in that sort of space? What are the things that you're expected to do to fundraise?
Well,
I think most people just see it in the movies, and
Yeah.
it's usually like, bags of cash for some shady promise. But I think it'd be helpful to put a little bit of sunlight on what that actually looks like in the real world.
there, and this is one thing that I hope and pray changes in the Republican Party. I said this back in 2018 when I ran for county commissioner, that we have to stop eating our own, and go back to the Reagan days. Don't tear up another Republican. For your own.
Commandment.
Yes. Millions of dollars get spent in primaries, and that's a Republican against a Republican. And by the time you get to the general election, that Republican that had a bruised battle for the primary, a lot of times they're broke by the time they get to the general, and they've been beaten up, and their Democrat opponent has a lot of fodder to go after them with, because the other Republican put it out there for them, and they will know what sticks. So it's very hard to really raise a lot of money for that general election.
And if I could, real quick on that point, just in a general, how much did you spend? How much did your campaign spend on your general election campaign?
40,000.
Okay.
It was very, because people will not give.
Did you know that for the county chair race in Dallas County, that the two candidates that ran spent over $200,000 between the two of them?
Yes.
Is that sort of some of the stuff you're talking about where the money goes in the primaries?
It does.
Wow.
In one of the races just east of Dallas, one organization alone put in $1 million for a candidate to win a seat that she'll only be there till January 14th when the new person's sworn in.
Yeah, that's right. Are you talking about, was that Lacey Hull's race?
No, this is for District 2, where Brent Money beat Jill Dutton.
Jill Dutton, that's what I'm thinking. Jill Dutton.
Yeah.
Jill Dutton, sorry, not Lacey.
Yeah.
Jill Dutton.
Because both of them are great people. Wes is Brent Money is much more conservative than Jill was. Jill's conservative, but Brent was much more conservative than her. And there was, I know, because one PAC donated $970,000 alone to her race. And then, by the time it gets to the general, because it's a very Republican area, and people, and you'll see a lot of one of our big PACs, they're running a lot of ads. 100% of our people won. We pick all the winners. Well, if you're picking a winner that's in a 60-40 Republican area, yes, it's easy to get behind that person. What's hard, and it's hard for me, it was hard for three of our other candidates in Dallas County, trying to raise money in a district, was three of them were like a 55-45 districts. One of them was a little bit more of a 60-40 kind of district, but it's hard for us to raise money to possibly flip a district if people are giving all of their money on the front end just to get the right Republican, and we don't necessarily always get the right Republican. I said it at we've got a Garland precinct chair meeting that we got started back in February, and we meet every month trying to build out and fill up the rest of our open precinct chairs in Garland right now, and do something like what they've been able to accomplish out in Rowlett. But I brought that up. We have to do a better job at vetting our candidates in the primary, and it doesn't take $1 million to vet that candidate.
Well, you're talking a little bit about the struggles with where money is spent, but I kind of guess I want to go back to the question is, as a candidate, how do you go about, or what is the process like when you're talking to these PACs or individual donors that can write $100,000, $50,000, $900,000 checks? Like, what is that process like? Without giving away any secrets that would prevent you from getting some of that money in the future, obviously.
Well, it is a lot of dialing for dollars. You know, these fundraisers, and even fundraisers, you know, they know what the numbers are. You know what the division of a district is, and if
And
they
by
don't,
fundraiser, you're talking about professional fundraisers that help you.
that help candidates at all levels, whether it's a county commissioner, a state representative race, you know, U.S. House race or whatever. You know, there's a lot of these companies out there, and they have their list, you know, their donor list that they've farmed for a number of years, and most of those are just like the big donors. If they give, you know, whether they give, you know, $5,000 or $500,000, they want to have the knowledge and feel that they really have an opportunity to win that race. Well, obviously, in the Republican primary, you're going to get a Republican to win that race in November, 9 times out of 10. Sometimes, you know, there may be a close race of 52, you know, 48 district. There's not a whole lot of those left in the state after the way that they gerrymandered everything in the last redistricting in 2020. But there's a couple of races that are that close that it's a little bit harder to get, easier, I should say, to get money even for a new candidate in one of those races than in my race. And
So yeah, just to kind of give some context for those that may not be familiar with this, you know, when the Texas legislature after the last census redrew all of the lines for all of the different districts, for the state senate, for the House, for Congress,
yeah.
for the school board, or I'm sorry, the state board of education, redrew all the lines.
yes,
And some of those districts, after they redrew them, are safe Republican districts.
yes,
You
and
know,
safe Democrat district.
some of them are safe Democrat districts. And so when you're talking about 60-40, 55-45, you're talking about the percentages of Democrat to Republican
yes.
and those sort of things.
Yes,
So some of these races, all the money is spent in the primary because those are considered safe seats. Donors know that they don't have to spend money in
Safe
November.
party seat- safe party seats.
They know they don't have to spend money in November for the Republican beat the Democrat. You spend all your money making sure the right Republican wins in the
Correct.
primary.
Correct.
Is that a fair way of
That's
describing it?
Exactly.
So, but then you have some districts like yours that are in play, right? It's not a guarantee one way or the other. I guess your district is definitely drawn or was drawn 113 to lean more towards the Democrat side.
Correct. And they were thinking 7 or 8%. It turned out a little bit more than that. But the hard thing about this district was she wasn't challenged 2 years ago. The incumbent wasn't challenged 2 years ago, so we had no idea where all of the traps were, so to speak. We in working the numbers that we did know, and the only numbers that we can really, fixate on are known Republican voters in the primary, known Democrat voters in the primary, and then we have the swing voters. We know that they vote in the primary, but they'll go from one to the other even in the primary. So we could see this data, but we didn't know, the swing voters. There was almost 4,000 more swing voters than even Democrats, from the way that it had voted the last time. So we didn't know where those swing voters, which direction they were going to go. Well, it turned out there were actually more unknown voters than that, and in my race there was 3,300 undervotes. And for those that don't know, undervote is there's a lot of people in this election cycle, especially in Dallas County as a whole, that they came in to vote for the president, vice president, senator, maybe some of the Texas Supreme Court or the appeals court, but they didn't get much farther past that. They stopped. And when they don't vote all the way down the ballot, it's defined as an undervote. So there's 3,300 more people that came vote for the president than voted in my race or in Jason Metcalf's race or Amy's race. One of them had like 3,800 undervotes. So we got to figure out who these people are and what do we have to do to actually get them engaged enough. Is it something that we as candidates need to do, as in like what I was talking about, Justice Katharina Haynes, that we can't touch everybody. It's just having been in elected office before, I've had people in both in Saxony and in Garland say, "Well, I didn't know you were going to do that." And it's like, well, it was on the internet. It went to your house. There was a billboard about it. There's all this information. It was in the newspaper. But well, I didn't know. It. You can't do everything to get everybody educated about who you are. You can only, try the best case scenario. And the consultant that we used, they actually win a lot of awards for their campaigns because they're very successful in social media and banner ads and such as this. They helped Governor DeSantis flip Miami-Dade County 3 years ago from blue to red. So they've had experience and being able to flip districts before. It's just we didn't have the resources this year, and hopefully, and we'll be meeting with some folks after the first year to see if this is something that really is attainable in 2 years. Because if we think that it might be, then it would have to be something that we would need to start in literally January, February this next year for the following election cycle.
And to put a little bit of a point on safe districts, in-play districts, things along those lines, at least in my experience, a lot of the groups that like to give big money or that have the ability to give big money, if they're looking to flip a seat, they're wanting that to be something that is within 5 points.
Yes.
Where it's, maybe the last election, it was, 52 to 47, something like that, within 5 points.
Steve Kennard, District 70 up in
Right.
Collin County, they tried.
And that's where they want to try to put their money into. Once you start getting outside of that, it's a lot of the big money people. Because, look, when you're talking about certain level of donors that are writing 6-figure checks, you're not necessarily just calling them up and having a conversation.
No.
Right? A lot of those people, they have chiefs of staff that they work with. They have political advisors that they work with. And so those people will help advise them on where they should be spending their money. Has that been your experience?
Yes, and there were some people that's got a pretty good name, I guess you could say, name ID, statewide consultants, political heads, talking heads, that because of what happened in this race 4 years ago, or in this district. It was a differently configured district 4 years ago. Will Douglas that ran 4 years ago, he actually raised like $1.5 million.
Wow.
But it was a much closer Republican. It was like a 52-48, really.
Well, really, to compare any of the districts, you can't compare what happened in 2000 to 2024 because while there may be the same number, it's an entirely different geographic area that district covers.
Exactly.
So it's comparing apples to oranges.
But some of these politicos, said, well, Will raised $1.5 million and he lost. Well, that's fine, but that was a different district. We've got a different electorate than what it was, for his race. So we really truly don't know, and we weren't able to raise the resources to actually, we couldn't run polls. We couldn't do a lot of stuff that we really needed and wanted to do to make it a much more competitive race. I think this could be a much more competitive race with the proper resources.
Right, because when you're talking about running a poll for a district of your size,
at least 20 grand.
20 grand, right? And when you're talking about somebody raising $1.5 million, they're not raising that with $50 and $100 donations.
It's
right.
You're getting
$100,000. Right. And another thing that I want to make sure that our audience understands, there's no limit in Texas.
No, not in a state house or Senate race.
Right. So if I think everybody thinks about there being like caps on how much money you can give. If you're running for a federal race, certainly the money you can give.
Even local races.
To a particular, you're running for school board, city council. Yeah. But if you're running for a Texas race, like the House, the governor, lieutenant governor, state senate, it's unlimited. If somebody wants to, somebody wins, right? They win the lotto and they show up and they want to give you those lotto winnings, you can take it.
Correct.
So I want to go and
Hint.
yeah, play your numbers, people. So, well, actually, now that Trump has improved Bitcoin and the stock market, there should be plenty of money out there to fund Republican races in the midterm.
It's starting, and I'm glad you brought that up about Trump's election, and it wasn't just about Trump winning; it was the fact that he won by the electoral count and the popular vote this time, and brought. I mean, just in Texas House, we picked up 2 additional seats. We flipped 2 seats. So, that helps. But what is really going to help in 2 years is if, and there's already the battle lines are being drawn in the U.S. Senate, even though we've got a majority, 53-47 majority in the Senate, they should, start approving, President Trump's nominees immediately, but they've already started, saying, well, they got questions, concerned about this one, like he's putting together a team that could be a very successful team, not, and yes, successful for Trump, but it's more in the fact, I think it'll be very successful for the United States and for the world at the end of the day, because a successful United States makes it a successful world.
And you regularly hear people talk about midterm elections and the performance of the White House and the performance on the national stage really affects if you were to be running again for the Texas House.
Yes.
Even though the Texas House has nothing to do with what Donald Trump is doing or the Congress or Senate in Washington, perception is reality, and you all will either benefit or will have the detriment based upon that performance.
Correct.
So you talked a bit about different methods of campaigning, different ways of touching voters. Typically when people think about a political campaign, what do you think about? Making phone calls, knocking on doors, yard signs, maybe ads on TV and the radio. Would you mind talking about the role that data and analyzing data has had? Because I mean, like I said, from you running from the Saxe City Council to you running now, I mean, you've seen how that's changed over the years. Would you mind talking about that a little bit?
Yeah, because the differences, city council, school boards and stuff, because a year and a half ago, Daphne won a 60-40 race. It was just 2 people in that race, and she won against a previous board member a 60-40 race. So, she did very well in the same area. But in this, you can only knock on so many doors. There was a candidate 4 years ago that ran in House District 107 that he himself literally knocked on over 20,000 doors.
Oh, wow.
And he still lost 70-30. So it's not just the person knocking on the door. A lot of it has to do with messaging. What President Trump has been able to do down on the Rio Grande has been, I think we could build off of that in more of our blue counties, whether it's Travis County, Harris County, Dallas County, that we can take that and the more successful that the Trump administration is, the better it will be for us in Dallas County, that we can say, nobody likes to hear "I told you so," but you could say, we told you this will be what happens if we're allowed to put this into place. If we're allowed to put this into place, you're better off. You got more money in the bank at the end of the day. It's, inflation's gone down, because inflation has slowed, but what we need is deflation. Right. Because over the last 4 years, they go, well, the inflation rate's down to 2.4, 2.5%, over the last 12 months. Okay, but if you compound that over the last 4 years, you have over a 25% inflation. Your paycheck hadn't increased by that amount, so our money goes shorter. More successful, economic, from the federal level, it comes all the way down here to the state level. We have to be able to take from what some of our successes were. There was a lot of money spent on a lot of our judicial races across the state. And we flipped a lot of judicial, our Fifth Court of Appeals, flipped that court. That we could take some of these wins this cycle and build upon it if we start basically tomorrow.
And we were talking earlier about like block walking,
Yes.
like ways that you can touch voters. And when you go block walking, you're not lining up at the street and knocking on every door on the street.
No,
right?
it's targeted.
Right. And you're targeted based upon the data that your campaign or things like that will provide for you.
Yeah, because we can see what we call a hard Republican. In the last 4 general election cycles, you voted Republican in each one of those election cycles. Weak Republican. You missed one here, you missed one there, so you're a weak Republican.
Well, just to make sure we're clear for our audience here, you can't tell who somebody voted for in the general election.
Just that they voted Republican or Democrat.
In the primary.
Yeah, in the primary.
So, for example, you can see that's whether somebody voted or not in the general election,
Correct.
what we just had here on the 5th.
Correct.
No idea which party they voted for.
Not at all.
But you can tell in March if
you
they
make your
voted.
assumptions
Right.
and you bring it forward
Okay.
and just expand it by the same. And the more the experts they'll play with the numbers that you had 10,000 people voted in the primaries in this district on both Republican and Democrat side back in March, but there were 61,000 people that voted. So you'll take what's happened in previous years. And because there wasn't a Republican that ran 2 years ago, there was no empirical data to build off of. This created that empirical data. We can take that and extrapolate what happened in March versus what happened in November and know where we need to work. If we did this again, we would know where to put more of our resources next time. Mesquite's going to be a key factor into winning this race.
And that's not just your candidacy or your future candidacy. Anybody running for office
Yes.
will use this sort of data. Would you talked about the experts, and in any campaign you have your hired experts.
Yes.
You talked about a fundraiser. Would you mind talking about what positions make up a campaign? When you're putting together a campaign team, who all is a part of that team?
To me, one of the most important parts is who your consultant's going to be, because you got a consultant and then you got a campaign manager. Consultant is the high level that helps keep all the pieces of the puzzle in place. The campaign manager, just below that, is who's going to be on the ground making sure that you get to this function over here. They find out about a function over here that you need to be at, coordinates the block walks, your fundraisers, always pick up, if in lower races that your city councils and school boards, they don't typically have in fundraisers. You sometimes, commissioners would have one, but typically your state house races and judicial races and stuff will have fundraisers, because they will have a list of known donors that give $5,000 to this race here, or $50,000 for this race here, or $100,000 for this race up here. So having a good consultant that knows all of your fundraisers is a key factor as well. I don't think it's a good idea to have a fundraiser that is tied to a consultant. I think they need to still be primarily independent of each other. Not that they're in competition with each other. It's just one specializes over here, one specializes over here, and it's one of those things that a lot of times is never the twain shall meet.
Yeah, not always the best to have the people raising the money advising you on how to spend the money.
Exactly. Yeah, just raise the money, and the consultants, based off of experience in the area in the previous races, they'll know where they need to emphasize and put money in over here. I actually had people that were running other people's races, reaching out and helping, with fundraising and stuff, because they knew me because of my years on the SREC, the State Republican Executive Committee. And so over my life, making, contacts that I have, it helped me do what I was able to do in this race. And it would leave me in the position that if we did move forward with another attempt at this, much better position than what I was at the start of this race this year.
Kind of talking on that point, Dallas County, you'd mentioned it earlier, there were a number of the seats flipped on the Court of Appeals. I'm trying to figure out if that's going to be 7 or 8 still to this day. Amazing situation there with Matt Kolodowski. But we also had, Morgan Meyer held on to his seat. Angie Chin Button held on to her seat.
Actually got by more votes than she did the previous opponent.
However, I would say neither one of those candidates are particularly popular with the I guess the precinct chairs, or a lot of the precinct chairs that we have in the county, or with the county party. What, in your view, as somebody that just ran for office, should the path forward be in Dallas County for Republicans to start picking up more seats and not just holding ground?
Knowing the district, and that's the thing, a previous office holder for this seat here, people used to ride her relentlessly. You need to be more conservative. You're Republican, vote more conservative, vote. Well, and she would always say, I'm voting my district. Well, when she was in a 51-49 district that, literally could have flipped at any time, she had to be very careful, not to alienate, the left so much that they wouldn't support her for reelection. And that, to me, a good consultant that knows how to read the numbers of the district is the primary factor. Because my consultant, I think he's honest, he's truthful. If he looks at it, he goes, no, we don't have a snowball's chance, walk away, I would believe it. If he says, with X amount of dollars, we have a solid chance of winning. Yeah, and the number that we landed on at the very beginning, when I first started talking to him about this, he goes, if we could raise $500,000, we have a great chance to flip this district. Raising the kind of money that we did this year, we made a good good old college try, but it was obviously we came up short.
Do you think that's still important though? Like, you look at a district and you say, well, we don't really have a good chance. There's plenty of districts, as we talked about redistricting, that people don't have a chance to win. But do you still think it's important for like good candidates to invest the time to make a good run at those different districts? Like you were saying, now you have the data for this first run. We can build upon that.
Yeah, and I was talking to Amy Ramsey that ran in 114. Hers was, I think, 63-37 in her race, but
which was better than the previous election. She did better than the previous.
We've got better data in what she was, how she ran her campaign, from door knocking to mailers, etc. Same thing with the county commissioner. We got a much better footing now, and the Democrats for many years, it didn't matter if it was a 70-30 Republican district, they would run somebody because you never know when a 2006 would come up. And what I mean by 2000, you two may know this, but for the listening audience, in 2006 was the last year that Kay Bailey Hutchinson ran for re-election for the United States Senate. If everybody in Dallas County that voted for Kay Bailey Hutchinson, if they would have actually voted all the way down ballot, we would have lost one judicial race, not 41 judicial races. I don't see a major flip of that nature happening for the Republicans in Dallas County anytime soon, but major party flips can and has happened in Dallas County in the last 25 years, and we've got to figure out what we've got to do to make that happen. One of the things that happened in 2006 is the Dallas mayor had put on the ballot roughly $150 million bond issues in South Dallas, and it brought people out that hadn't voted in years or wasn't even registered before that came out and voted. And the Democrat Party is smart as anything. They got latched onto those people and have kept hold of them. Hopefully they're all still alive, but they're still voting their way to this day, and that's still some of the most Democrat district or areas in Dallas.
Well, it's also part of the county that the Dallas County Republican Party has not been recently involved in at all. So you talk about door knocking, right? There were, we'll just say, roughly 60,000 voters in your race.
Yes.
I just did the math, real quick here. I'm a lawyer, so I needed a calculator. So, if you're block walking, hitting 20 houses an hour is good. That's a pretty good clip.
Very good, especially if somebody answers the door.
Right. So if you're hitting 20 an hour, just to make it easy, that's 3,000 hours of block walking for you to knock on all the doors in your district for the voters that actually came out and voted one time. And how often? I mean, but you knock on 20 doors in an hour, and you might get one or two, three, four that'll actually answer.
With the advent of Ring doorbells and the other type of Ring type doorbells, they got a camera and they can see you. The number of people that actually will answer the door has dropped significantly in the last 4 or 5 years.
And do you blame them?
No.
Like, I tell them, don't answer the door. Don't answer the door.
Well, and that's where I guess I make that point to this sense of, and the same thing, if you're making phone calls, your calls are screened. How many times are people actually going to answer the call if you're giving them a ring to talk about your campaign? So it gets to the point where, we talk about money in politics, and I know people want to get money out of politics, but it's almost one of those things that's just an unfortunate necessity. Right, because you've got to be able to send them something in the mail, or have an ad on TV or on the radio, or digital ads on Facebook or Instagram or X or wherever people are looking.
Yeah.
You've got to spend the money to do that sort of stuff. And what, send something to somebody's house? Most mailers, it's like $1.50. On the low end.
We had through a friend of mine that I had met when I was on SREC that helped two candidates win their primaries and general election, had come up with almost like a newspaper type deal that even printing the newspaper and mailing it out, it was only like 86, 87 cents a piece, but we couldn't,
but that's by, you're talking about sending that out one time.
Yeah.
Is $30,000.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. So we're talking about the money that's needed to run, a political campaign when you're the size of the Texas House.
You still got to have mailers out, because the older generation, they still want something in their hand. They may throw it in the trash, but they want to see is that what we talked about earlier, that they got to see you, smell you, touch you, taste you before they'll vote for you.
And you're not going to send out one mailer.
No.
Right, because you got to send out 2, 3, 4 mailers to have any real effect. So it's one of those things that, just doing that, you could spend $100,000 just sending out pieces of mail.
Exactly.
And only sending out 3 or 4 pieces of mail for a campaign. Is that fair to say?
100%.
So when we're talking about the need for money, that's the sort of stuff that we're talking about.
Yes.
The digital advertising, that might be more efficient per view, but then the question is how effective is it at all, because it's sort of passive.
Yeah, how many clicks are you going to get off of that?
So this is where, it's romantic to say that somebody can just go out there and put on new tennis shoes and go knock every door in the district and we're going to win. But it's you're going to do that and you might talk to 1,200 voters.
If you're lucky, but and that's what I was getting at with the Ring type doorbells and stuff, and just people just to survive today. Both husband and wife are working, and when you have time, and a lot of folks don't know about this. It's not like a House member or Senate member banks off of the job. House member gets paid $600 a month. So it's not like you have to survive off of donations. unless you're just independently wealthy, and I'm not. And it's a lot of these PACs, organizations, that fund both sides, because a lot of these organizations that I was looking at for funding, funds Democrats as much, because there's I don't talk about it a whole lot, but there's a deal in once you're in office, it doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. They got what they define as a friendly incumbency. That if you've not done anything to hurt them, they'll support you because it's the devil that they know versus the one that they don't know.
Interesting.
And the incumbency effect. We could talk for a while about that, but we've talked quite a bit about the election. I want to give you an opportunity. You've really sort of exhibited sort of a servant's heart on what you're trying to do here, on the various offices that you've held, none of which are going to make you rich. No. Running for any of these sort of things. What's next? What are you working on now? Other than maybe fishing or hunting or something.
Well, luckily, politics is not my life. I mean, I do a lot with politics, but it's not my life. I'm in the real estate business for 41 years. I'm the president right now of the Noon Exchange Club of Garland. We just got through spending about $40,000 buying Christmas gifts for 367 underprivileged kids in the Garland School District. That on December 4th, we'll be having a big Christmas party and be busing all these kids in for this party and give them their gifts there at the Curtis Colwell Center. And I do other things in the community. So, especially with my wife being on the school board, there's 72 campuses in the Garland School District, and there's something going on at all times. And so, I do a lot, to support her because she still works corporate America. Because what a lot of folks may not know, some bigger councils, they give you a little stipend. You'll get $400 or $500 a month kind of thing. But there's not a school board in the state of Texas. Out of the 1,200 school districts in the state of Texas, no school board member gets paid a dime.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
And so, you really, for school board, you really got to have a passion and supplemental income, be it a spouse or, you just do well enough. But she works corporate America and does the school board stuff. And, so I still do a lot of, to support whatever, she needs done, and it could be something, whether it's around the house or in the community, we're constantly going places and stuff. So as far as what may be in my future, we'll my team, and that's some confidants, my consultant that I use this cycle, we'll sit down after the first of the year and really pour over the data that we get out of this election, and see if there truly is a path to flipping this district, and start, if it looks like that there really is a path to victory, we would start immediately working on the big donors, because unless you can get some money coming in immediately, to where you can go out there and do things in the community to start turning these voters over to our side, it would be a fruitless venture.
And where can people follow you? Are you on Facebook, Instagram? Like where can they follow you?
I still have both my personal Facebook page, just at Stephen Stanley, and then I still have my campaign Facebook page, Stanley for Texas House. I think, no, it's just my personal that goes over to Instagram. My email for the campaign is still out there. Same thing, Stanley Forward Texas House at gmail.com. So the website's up, the Facebook page is still up, my emails are still up, so I can still be accessed. And I still see a lot of people, hitting the at least the Facebook page, see about any updates. And I really haven't updated since the election. It's just kind of sort of in the recovery mode, because as hard as you put in, and this is one thing that a few more people know this election cycle that actually had come on board volunteering with all the different candidates, but people don't realize how much time and energy, it's not just about the money, but there's a lot of time and energy that and it's not just a candidate, it's the whole candidate's family and a lot of their close friends that, you got to have buy-in, not just from one person. It truly is a group of people behind each candidate that ever runs for any office.
Stephen, I appreciate you taking your time to talk with us. On behalf of A Better Dallas, it was our pleasure to support you as a candidate. I would tell anybody that would listen that you are one of, if not the hardest working candidate that we have in Dallas County as a Republican, that's going to put your own sweat equity into anything that you're doing, into any race. But also, and I think this is an important thing, you also support other campaigns.
Absolutely.
You will also be out there walking and helping to support other Republican candidates. And again, I just greatly appreciate all that you've done in that regard, all the service that you've given to the community, the time you took here today. I want to thank our viewers for tuning in to another episode of A Better Conversation. Again, encourage you, subscribe to the A Better Dallas YouTube account or YouTube channel. That way you can get notifications whenever we have a new episode come up. We want to hear from you in the comments. What are things that you're interested in hearing? What are areas that you want to know more about? Make sure to like the video. This is a Republican group, Republican Conversations. YouTube always doesn't love those. So help us out, like, subscribe, share with your friends. But then the last ask I'll have is let Stephen Stanley know that you appreciate the work that he's done. Follow him on his social media. Let him know that you're as grateful as we are, that he made the tremendous sacrifice to fight to try to represent you and to have a voice in the last election. Again, Stephen, thank you for joining us.
Always appreciate you. Thank you.
Hope we had a better conversation with you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.